Holy sh! Game of Thrones Season 6. Best season so far? Best season so far. Before we go any further, brace for spoilers. You have been warned. 10 weeks ago, I texted my brother at the end of episode 1 and said they are not messing around anymore. The end of the season is going to be Dany setting sail for Westeros. And what did we get? A season that trimmed down the cast to its most significant players, advanced the overall plot with a speed we have never seen before in the entire series, and set the stage for an endgame that just might live up to expectations. Let's go over the highlights. First up, Jon Snow is alive! Praise the Lord of Light! He is risen! Was it the worst kept secret in television history? Maybe. But for 2 episodes, we waited. And waited. And waited. And with every passing minute, we wondered if maybe, just maybe, he really was dead. And then he opened his eyes. And when that happened, who did not scream at the top of their lungs so powerfully that they were coughing up blood for the next 2 days? Okay, maybe that was just me. And it was handled perfectly. The show kept us hanging for just long enough that we anticipated, but not so long that we ever lost interest. And when he opened his eyes, we knew. Ramsay was screwed. As for Ramsay, that was one problem I have with the season. Ramsay hung around for way too long. Yes, preparations were necessary for the battle, and it did make sense to hold off the big confrontation until near the end. But Ramsay was so unlikable as a character. Unlikable in a way that no other character has been. Not even Joffrey. Like Joffrey, Ramsay is undeniably, irredeemably evil. But unlike Joffrey, we have never enjoyed it. With Joffrey, we enjoyed the slow burn, knowing that eventually, he would suffer for his evil. With Ramsay, though, he was too sadistic, too much of a monster. We could never find a way to enjoy waiting for his eventual demise. So for me, there was too much Ramsay this season. I know why he was there, but too much. But back to the good. Jon Snow is alive and willing to kick Ramsay's teeth in. And Sansa Stark finally has a season where she is not raped and humiliated. She's endured about as much suffering as anyone in the series, and she's always been a character in a position that renders her unable to react. Her jumping off the wall at the end of season 5 was a major turning point because she finally did something. She took action. She took charge of her life. And in this season, she comes into her own as Lady Stark. She's not a little girl anymore. When she warns Jon about underestimating Ramsay in battle, sure, we know she has no military experience. But the fact that she does have knowledge of the man and does act on that knowledge is something that Sansa of prior seasons never would have been capable of doing. She and Jon are House Stark. And she knows that if they don't fight for it, House Stark will be erased forever. And the Battle of the Bastards is fantastic. Easily the best battle in the series, and the standout episode so far. Beautifully filmed, exceptionally well written, and with an ending that makes you stand up and cheer. House Stark is back. And with a new king in the north. Oh yeah, not bad for a bastard. In other Stark news, Arya finally gets out of Braavos. It was an interesting plot at first, but the longer Arya's training went on, the less sure anyone seemed that it was going somewhere. But when she finally stopped and said no to assassinating someone for money, we knew things were going to be okay. And I loved the way they handled it. A delightful cat and mouse game leading Arya eventually to stand before her former mentor with needle in hand and say, "I'm going home." Best ending of the series up to that point. And then in the finale, she popped up out of nowhere and got her revenge on Walder Frey by cooking his sons into a delicious meat pie just before slitting his throat. The Starks send their regards. Bran continues to train north of the Wall, peering into the past to learn the truth about his father's duel in front of the Tower of Joy, and, perhaps more importantly, the truth about Jon's parentage. Look, we all knew the truth, but it's nice to have it finally confirmed. And it will have major implications in the endgame. Personally, I expect to see a north-south brother-sister thing happen, but that's just speculation at this point. Bran is another problem with the season. He's been positioned as a much more important figure than anyone could have guessed, but we're still waiting for a payoff. It does feel like the plot is going somewhere, but that part of the story really did not advance this year the way the rest of the story did. That's disappointing. But let's talk about that scene with Hodor. Not only did learning why Hodor says Hodor all the time elevate him into a genuinely tragic character, but the fact that Bran's visions can impact the past is going to have major implications for the endgame. Cersei's problems only got worse this season. She kept trying new ways of dealing with them, only to find herself blocked at every turn, eventually even by her own son, the king, who has turned into a religious fanatic, I guess. And it looked like, as aggressively as she played the game, she had finally lost, definitively lost, and we collectively were wrong about where she would end up. And then we got the quietest 1-2 punch in the series. A very understated act of treason in which Cersei blew up virtually everyone she had a beef with, followed by King Tommen jumping to his death from a window. I got to that scene and I texted my brother, "So who's in line for the throne now?" I should have known. Truth is, I always knew. We all did. And when Cersei is crowned Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, we knew. It had to come to this. And then the moment we've waited 6 years for finally comes. Daenerys Stormborn, the Unburnt, Queen of the Andals and of the First Men, Queen of Meereen, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Breaker of Chains, and Mother of Dragons, sets sail for Westeros, setting the stage for a climactic showdown between Queen and Khaleesi. And what a showdown it will be. Think about it. These two women have endured trials that would have long ago broken anyone else. They have been forged in fire. They are Valyrian steel made flesh. Cersei has lost all of her children to this game. Dany has lost or sacrificed everything and everyone who made her happy in her pursuit of the throne. These women will be formidable adversaries. And that, I think, is the main takeaway from this year. After watching characters we love suffer almost endlessly, after watching the game spiral out of control, it's refreshing to see some light, even if it's only a distant light. Winter is no longer coming. Winter is here, and the game is coming to an end. Much has been made over the fact that Georgie Boy has yet to finish the novel that was to be the basis of this season. Will he finish it before the end of the season? Next season? Before the end of the series? Maybe. Probably. I don't care. Much of the speed and the overall success of this year can be attributed to the fact that the showrunners were no longer limited by the material that they had to cover. They really only had to deal with the broad strokes that Martin gave them, which meant they could change the pacing of this year in a way that they really couldn't in years past. And as a result, we got a tighter season. We finally got payoffs that have been far too long coming. And I really hope that they keep up the newfound intensity and the drive going into the endgame. If they do, like I said earlier, it might just live up to expectations. This is Jonathan for Pomegranate Radio, saying thank you for listening. You've been beautiful. Have a good night.
Pomegranate.